Good afternoon. Welcome to our regular schedule of DCO3O, our cooperative education course. My name is Kobe Flatt, and today we are on our 13th day of walking through the Creating Opportunities Through Cooperative Education IL course. Yesterday, we made it through WMIS. We reviewed the Workplace Hazardous Material Information System, and I directed you to the online course so that you can complete that, save the certificate, and copy it to your digital portfolio. Today we are going to run through privacy, confidentiality, and ethics. Tomorrow's class will be about decision making, and Thursday will be all online, working through navigating government websites for information on worker health and safety. Remember, we don't broadcast on Fridays. It's a chance for you to get caught up on assignments. Please be submitting those assignments as you do them. Anyone who has not yet completed their student forms and sent them back to me, you must get on that. Part of your final grade is an evaluation from your employer. I need to be able to contact your employer, and all of that information is in the student forms that you fill out at the beginning of the course. So please get those in. Today we're going to break down the difference and similarities between privacy, confidentiality, and ethics, and we will look at technology in the workplace as it coincides with the content of today. It skips a little bit in your unit, but I want to address it all, compact it, because next week is our last week of live on-air classes. So let's jump in. We are going to first talk about privacy. Privacy is the state or condition of being free from being observed or disturbed by other people or public attention. When we talk about privacy, there is the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act. PIPPA, it's just fun to say, PIPPA, is the federal privacy law for private sector organizations. It sets out the ground rules for how businesses must handle personal information in the course of commercial activity. We're going to get into what this means. You've all come across it at one point or another, whether it's downloading a new app, whether it's updating your iOS, or when you turn of age in school. And normally elementary school, the parents get a phone call whether you miss class or you're late to class. They can access your records and your grades. When you hit 18, if you're still in school, then you don't have to share that information anymore. You now have the power to say that you don't want other individuals knowing. If you do want, then you actually have to sign the Freedom of Information. That is the release of that information so that the school can still contact your family, so that the teachers can still have a conversation with your parents. Otherwise, you can just say, you have to discuss everything with me. So you would have had a taste of it in different aspects of your life, whether it was personal or educational or at work. That brings us to confidentiality. Confidentiality is the state of keeping or being kept secret or private. There are laws like the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, this is FIPPA, that help protect privacy and confidentiality. FIPPA ensures your personal information is kept safe and used properly. So not just safe, but used properly. That if it is to be shared, it goes through the proper channels and not just out in the open for anyone to intercept. I mentioned how in our going-ons that we deal with these different laws, whether we are aware of it or not. Bringing to your attention the information trail. From the time we get up until we go to bed at night, we leave a trail of data behind us for others to collect, merge, analyze, and even sell. Often, this is without our knowledge or consent. This is where these acts and laws have been put into place to help minimize that and ideally eliminate completely. But think about your day. Say you get up at 8:15 and you're sitting down to breakfast and you download a new app. That app company now gets access to all the information on your phone. How many of you, when you are downloading a new app, actually stop to read the terms and agreements? How many of you go through reading all of the legalese before you hit I agree? So many of us, just out of habit, oh yeah, this is fine, I agree, and then you continue to play the new game you just downloaded. There is fine print in just about everything. Sometimes we do take the time to consider which we want to accept, which we don't. If you go to a new website, it often will pop up, do you want to manage your cookies? And if it's easy and convenient for us, we might. If it's something like getting to a new game or a new app that you've downloaded, often you don't stop to read it through, you just scroll to the end, I agree, and you're not even sure what you've just signed your name to. You hear all the horror stories of the way it can go wrong. There was an article in the news not too long ago about an accident with an Uber driver that the family tried to go to court for, to get restitution for the injuries that took place. But the app said that you will not press charges. And without reading through all the fine print, they just agreed, used the service, and now have to deal with the consequences. Things to think about. Okay, let's think about our information trail some more. So 8:15, you download a new app. 8:35, you leave home and you start your vehicle. A lot of vehicles have GPS in them now. I will start my vehicle remotely from inside the warmth of my home, and then I get a little ding on my phone and it says 6 minutes to work. It knows my routine. It knows where I go during the week. It knows where I go on Sunday mornings. It will tell me, 5 minutes to Mom's house. I thought, how do you know I'm going to my mom's house? You don't know that, but it does, and it's sneaky. Often our smart devices connect with our new vehicles that have all of these bells and whistles. So there's another data trail. All right, 8:45 a.m. We are now driving to work. Here our GPS has the highlighted route. It can tell us the fastest way. It can tell us our most convenient way. It can suggest stopping at Tim Hortons for a coffee before we get to work. All different nuggets of data that are being picked up by networks, and not to go into too tin hat conspiracy theory, but it's all around us. So now we say 8:50, we arrive at work and we swipe in. A lot of companies have the key fob system, and the key fob that you get is actually coded to you. So when you swipe in, the powers that be, the IT, can find out who swiped in. They can find out if it was you or a colleague. It knows your chip for you. Other organizations actually have biometrics. It will be a thumbprint scanner that you have to use to get in. And we're not talking top secret Fort Knox where you need to do your eye scan and a thumbprint. There's an organization here in town that uses thumbprint scanners to tell when workers are coming and going. So it's not that futuristic anymore. It's here. Let's say 9 a.m. you log on to your work computer. The organization records the login time and all of your computer activity. At 10:05, you might call a friend. You might call a significant other. You might call your child's school. You make a phone call that now is recorded with your phone company. At 11:35, you're going to use your bank card to buy lunch. Now there's the bank record usage. It knows where you've swiped your card or tapped your card at exactly what time and records how much, obviously. At 12:30, say you post a photo of your lunch. I don't know, is that still a thing? Do people still take pictures of their food and post it? Maybe, I'm not sure. I remember it used to be a thing. It would drive me crazy. But let's say you do. Now you have that time stamped. You have the photo not only time stamped to your phone, but if you upload it to any social media app, it's being monitored, it's being recorded. If you have a 12:45. 12:45, you use the phone in your workplace to make a call. When you use a company phone, the company records calls and it may monitor them even. A lot of times we're on the other end of it. We're the civilian, so to speak, who's calling in to the credit card company to ask a question. It will state this call may be recorded for training purposes or whatever it may be. You are to always notify when you are being monitored or recorded. Doesn't always happen, so you have to be mindful of that. Often when you start work at a new place of employment, you're signing a lot of papers. Hopefully you're reading through it thoroughly and you're reading the fine print, but a lot of this is in there under their technology user agreement. We're going to get to that at the end of today's class, but be mindful that companies often record and monitor calls. So now say you've got a 4 p.m. doctor's appointment. Your health card is used to record the appointment and stored in a government database. 4:45, you might now need to go pick up a prescription that you received from your doctor's appointment. The pharmacy records prescription and they add it to your personal information in their database. A lot of times, if you've ever had to check into the ER, they will always ask, if somebody calls to see if you're here, can we tell them yes or no? That's part of that Freedom of Information Act, that release of personal information. They want your consent that that information can be shared. Lastly, just to sum up our example of a daily routine, you go home at night, 7 p.m., you do some research on the internet. Your web browser records usage, and now not only has a history of it, uses the cookies in algorithms to determine types of advertising to specifically target you and what would appeal to you. So this might just be a normal day. There's nothing really out of the ordinary. Maybe you don't go to the doctor or pick up a prescription every day, but the idea of how we are so surrounded by technology that is collecting our data, merging, analyzing, and sometimes selling our data. It's something to be mindful of. So how do you feel about your personal information being in so many places? Wouldn't you want organizations to guard your personal information and keep it safe? You always want to think about it from both sides. So keep these things in mind while you're in your placement. I know a lot of you, it's not feeling like a placement because it's your actual job and we're just tacking on co-op credits. And yes, that's fine. I will often still say placement for the sake of our co-op course. But think about that when you're at work. You will be exposed to confidential information throughout your business day. Sometimes more sensitive information than others. Sometimes we don't think much of it. But confidentiality includes information not only about clients, but your colleagues and your organization as well. Sometimes we think about just the confidential document that comes across our desk, but it also has to do with the interactions you have between your colleagues and information that you're gathering about your organization to do your job. It's necessary to be in the loop for a lot of it, but doesn't mean it should leave the workplace. So that's what we're going to talk about now. Confidentiality in the workplace. Keep it confidential. Information related to the workplace must remain in the workplace. Think of it as what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. You don't want information related to the operations of the company, as well as the customer or your colleagues, to be disclosed outside the workplace, even with family or friends. Sometimes it can be easy to come home and vent about what so-and-so did, how your day went, what your boss made you do, without realizing that you are spilling confidential information. You have to be mindful about what is being talked about and with whom. Most times it's not even okay to discuss with your family and your friends. No company information should be disclosed to clients unless authorized by the supervisor. Now, this sometimes has to do with the information, depending on the company. If you're talking about selling things or creating things, you might want to have a leg up. It's not even always nefarious about, ooh, we want to get more money out of them. Sometimes it's just that they don't need to know and it doesn't pertain to them, so don't disclose it to clients unless it's something that is directed to them, for them, and your supervisor authorizes it. So last thing, keep in mind that all information should be kept confidential. Now, this is even after you leave your co-op placement, or for a lot of our sakes, with those of you that already have a job and you're in it, when you leave your workplace. If you happen to move on, whether it was a good goodbye or messy goodbye, whether you were leaving on good terms or maybe let go, you still have to keep the information learned confidential. We're going to get into a few reasons why, but to lay that groundwork now, sometimes it's for your own good. You don't want to be the person that goes around bad-mouthing companies once you've left them. It will be something that follows you around. You can get a reputation, and you still have signed that you won't go talking about what happened because it was confidential. So what happens if you do? What happens if you don't keep things confidential? There are consequences for breach of confidentiality. Confidentiality in employment is implicit. Now, this is regardless of whether or not you as an employee have signed an agreement. I talked at the beginning of this class about how I need your student forms back. One of the student forms is about confidentiality. You have to sign a confidentiality agreement for working in the workplace and obtaining a co-op credit. You might have had to sign one as well when you got hired. Unlike yesterday's conversation where if you complete your WMIS training with your employer, you can get a copy of that and send it to me. Regardless of whether or not you've signed one with your employer, you have to sign the student confidentiality agreement form and send that in to me. Back to the breach of confidentiality consequences, there can be consequences whether or not you have signed a confidentiality agreement. Now, the penalty for breach of confidentiality can be severe and long-lasting. The first instance is if you breach confidentiality, you might be fired. There's that termination of employment. Now, this happens when employees sign a confidentiality agreement and don't abide by it. That could be all they need for grounds of releasing you. Again, because we talked about regardless of whether or not you have signed that agreement, you can be fired, you can be terminated if you didn't do your due diligence to protect information. In most cases, employees who sign a confidentiality agreement who violate it can be fired because you are in violation of an employment contract. But even if you didn't, if you, say for instance, own a computer security company and an employee's laptop is stolen, that employee didn't encrypt sensitive data on that computer per the company policy, it would still constitute a breach of confidentiality and you could be let go. Things to be mindful of. You always want to do your due diligence to make sure that if anything were to happen, you have done right by all the policies and procedures laid out to you by your employer. Now, another consequence could be paying civil lawsuit damages. This one is a little bit more intense. You often see this in healthcare. Say, for instance, a doctor discloses medical information to a person not authorized to receive that information. You have breached patient confidentiality, and consequences could include a civil lawsuit for medical malpractice. Healthcare privacy is essential, not only to protect a patient's right to decide who has access to sensitive information, but also to protect doctors and other healthcare professionals from malpractice claims. Breach of patient confidentiality consequences can include a sizable award for damages and a loss of reputation for that doctor or that clinic. To guard against these types of breaches, you sometimes will see or learn that the employer has purchased insurance. So even though you may not, sometimes you might, but you may not have to pay those damages, it still could reflect poorly on you for multiple reasons. Recommendations for new jobs if you were looking for a solid reference. We talked about how it can be like a blot on your record that follows you to future job prospects. The next is standing trial in a criminal case. So this happens in extreme cases. Such a charge is typically reserved for serious cases in which breach caused significant financial, physical, or emotional loss. So for instance, if an employee's breach of confidentiality involved theft of your proprietary information or intellectual property that was then later used for financial gain, criminal charges may be warranted. Theft is a violation of criminal law that in some instances can be punishable by a stiff fine or imprisonment. As a business owner, you would report the theft to law enforcement, and then the state or federal government charges the employee with the crime. So you're not going to get handcuffed by your employer, but it will be reported to the proper authorities and taken from there. So now it feels like coming down from that. The fourth consequence is the loss of reputation. And although a tarnished reputation may not seem as harsh, as big as a fine or imprisonment, it can have serious long-term consequences for an employee who is guilty of breach of confidentiality. It's especially true if the employee works in specialized industry in which competing companies are very familiar with one another. Employers will not look favorably on any prospective employees who were terminated due to a confidentiality breach, let alone convicted of a crime related to that type of violation. In the long run, a person who violates the privacy of a patient or client or violates the confidentiality of an employer will find it difficult to shake that reputation for the rest of their professional life. Now, this is a little bit terrifying if you are in a small town or small community and everybody kind of knows everybody. That's why it's so important to take it seriously, that you always have to maintain that professionalism, that confidentiality, doing your due diligence to make sure that you are not at risk of exposing anything you're not supposed to. So I wanted to go through and practice some case studies, as you will have to do case studies for your assignments in this Unit 4 material. To practice, case study number 1 says, Sarah's co-op experience is in a medical laboratory. She helps the technician complete the pregnancy tests. Sarah learns that a student from her school is pregnant. On her return to school, she tells her best friend about what she has learned. The pregnant student learns that other people are aware of her condition, and then Sarah sees her crying in the school hallway out of the school. What is the issue? Well, we have a huge breach of confidentiality here. Something that Sarah learned while in her co-op placement, while in the workplace. She discussed outside with people who were not authorized to know the information. What consequences can Sarah expect as a result of her breach of confidentiality? Remember, we had the 4. We had talked about some being more serious than others. We want to think then, loss of reputation, if we start with number 4, yes, probably she will find it difficult to get employed when she's done school out of her co-op placement if she's sharing these things now. Maybe it will be a learning experience for her. Somebody will say she was young and didn't know. But really, we just talked about how in the healthcare profession, this is a huge no-no, that if you are disclosing patient information, then you could open yourself up to a civil lawsuit. There would definitely be grounds for, here if we go back and we look and we talk about disclosing personal information, how the damages for things like emotional loss can be real. She could also be terminated immediately because she did not do her due diligence to protect the information, whether or not she signed a confidentiality agreement. So do not let this be you. Case study number 2. As part of your co-op placement, you work for a construction company. The boss knows you work fast on computers and asks you to enter all the client information in the database. That evening at dinner, you mention to your brother that you like having the responsibility of updating the client database. Now, your brother, who has just begun a new painting business, asks if you would copy the list of client information to a memory stick. He states that the list could be potential clients for him as well. He offers to give you a percentage of all the sales from the client list if you just do this small favor. What could be the repercussions of giving your brother the list? Well, we talked about at the very beginning, if we go back to our first slide, how the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act, FIPPA, is the federal privacy law for private sector organizations. It sets out the ground rules for how businesses must handle personal information in the course of commercial activity. They have not signed on with the brother. They have not agreed to have their personal information sold or distributed for advertising or for others to learn of where they live and their phone number. So could definitely, if you happen to do this, you could lose your job. You could be fired for not protecting information. You would definitely have your reputation tarnished, and you might, even depending on how much information was released, could open yourself to the other two as well. Last one. Leanne's co-op experience is at the payroll department of a school board because one day she would like to go into accounting. Her supervisor asks her to update the database related to teaching staff. Now she must verify the name, address, phone number, age, years of experience, and salary for each teachers. All of the teachers that Leanne is dealing with are elementary teachers, but Leanne would like to know the salaries of her high school teachers. So she searches for and finds their information. Is this a breach of confidentiality? Again, it's like a misuse of power. Just because you have access to doesn't mean you should. So what could the consequences be for Leanne, as well as the school board, if someone discovered what Leanne has done? Looking at our 4 options, Leanne would definitely have a tarnished reputation. If the information leaked and it caused financial, physical, or emotional loss, there could be a criminal trial. If personal information gets leaked and is disclosed to people who are not authorized, then you could end up paying civil lawsuit damages. So not only would Leanne's reputation be tarnished, she could be standing criminal trial. The school board would be open to damages. They would have to pay for any damages. They might have insurance, they might not. And Leanne would most likely be terminated and let go for not doing their due diligence to protect the information. So even though it seems like it's not a big deal, I'm not looking into those that I'm working with here right now, but if you're misusing it and expanding it, it is definitely not okay. Let's look further at confidentiality laws. Looking more into the Privacy Act. The Privacy Act is a law that governs the personal information handling practices of federal government institutions. This act applies to all of the personal information the federal government collects, uses, as well as discloses. It gives individuals the right to access and request correction of personal information held by these federal government institutions. There are a lot of laws and acts, as you can see, we're already on our 3rd one, about protecting your personal information. There's the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Getting into it a little bit more, the law that provides individuals with a right of access to records and personal information under the custody or control of Ontario government ministries and agencies. An example of this, every student has an Ontario student record. It's your OSR. It has all of your information in it from your entire educational history. Your kindergarten report cards are in there. Your letter of expulsion, if you were ever expelled, is in there. It contains your educational history. You can see that at any time. You have the right to access your personal information. You can learn of what's in there because it's about you. This act has privacy protection provisions concerning the collection, use, disclosure, retention, and disposal of personal information. When you change schools, your OSR moves with you, and I can assure you that there are a lot of forms and waivers and documents that have to be signed in order for your OSR to change hands from one school to another. The next that I wanted to throw in here are the anti-spam laws. Canada has anti-spam laws to help protect Canadians while ensuring that businesses can continue to compete in the global marketplace. This new law prohibits the sending of commercial electronic messages without the recipient's consent. This new law prohibits altering transmission data, so delivering to a different destination without express consent. It prohibits the installing computer programs without express consent. Trying to think of the name for if you piggyback and you're adding, like, I don't know, the computer techies, is it like a worm, that virus that goes with it? I don't know, but it's covered here. False advertising. This is the misleading of information. Collection of personal information through computer systems. Again, you can manage your own cookies. The collection or use of IP addresses without permission. This is that address harvesting where they can find out where you are and use it for specific advertising targeting. So Canada has these anti-spam laws to protect from that. And that brings us to ethics. Ethics are the rules of right or wrong, good and bad. You can think of them as codes of conduct, much like the Ten Commandments. They are ways of being a good person, what good people do. You can think of it as goals of someone who is virtuous. What you do to create good character. The study of right and wrong, the basis for praise and blame. Now there are personal ethics and there's business ethics. Personal ethics form a system of behavior and they can apply to a specific individual, a company, or society. Ethics form the basis for the kind of person you are, the organization you represent, the society you are a part of, feeling guilty when you do something wrong, and how we treat other people. Business ethics refers to rules of right and wrong, but with a narrower focus. It provides the standards for proper conduct by employers and employees in a business profession, that professionalism. Let's see if we can identify possible conflict between job expectations, that would encompass the business ethics, and personal ethics. So let's think of some ethical scenarios here. We've got scenario number 1. A police officer is asked to do security duty in front of an abortion clinic. Part of the job description is to escort patients safely into the clinic. We want to think about what could the possible conflicts between business ethics and personal ethics be. Personal ethics might be that you believe in pro-life, that you are pro-choice, that you think that every baby should have the chance at life to be born. So now, if your job is requiring you to escort patients into an abortion clinic, you might be at conflict. You might not feel great about protecting something that you don't believe in, that system of beliefs, your ethics of your right and wrong. So it could cause conflict in a situation like this. Second scenario, a student is placed in a facility where animal testing occurs. What could be the possible conflict between job expectations, the business ethics, as well as the personal ethics? Again, if you are against harming innocent animals, if you think that we have better ways of testing and new technology, and you are in agreement with PETA, then you would have a really hard time working for a company that does animal testing. You would be in conflict of doing your job duties or responsibilities if you don't believe in it. So things to consider when we talk about ethics in the workplace, as well as personal ethics that might have conflicting issues at times. This brings us all the way back to our first workshop with Vicki Cheeseman, who did our goal setting and personal management. Then we talked about the second one for job searching. You want to have a good career fit. You want to find a company where the business ethics align with your personal ethics. You don't want to compromise yourself and put yourself in a position of conflict between the two. You want to find a career that is a good fit where your personality, interests, natural abilities, skills all coincide, your values, because then you will have job satisfaction and you won't wrestle with guilt at the end of the day if you're being asked to do things that you don't believe in. The next part that we're going to practice is how different forms of business activity can become a concern, how it can present as an ethical issue. So the first one I wanted to look at is product safety. Why could that be a concern in the workplace? How could it become an ethical issue? If we're thinking about it, it would be unethical to sell a product to a consumer knowing that it is unsafe. For example, I often get news alerts about product recalls. It might be a food, it might be a product. My vehicle, the dealership will send me a letter saying the company has recalled this. Please bring it in at your earliest convenience so we can fix it. It would be unethical to sell a product knowing it is unsafe. You don't want people to get E. coli or listeria or burns from airbags. You want to keep everybody safe. What about accepting gifts? How could that be a concern? How could it be an ethical issue to accept gifts? Well, again, you want to think of time and place. You want to think of, is it an officer of the law? Are they accepting a gift that has a bribery insinuation attached to it where, take this gift certificate and ignore that ticket you're going to write? If it's about trying to get a job promotion over somebody else and you start to butter up your boss and you're giving them things, is it ethical to be maybe cheeky to get a leg up over somebody else? The last one I wanted to take a look at are the environmental issues. How can it be an ethical issue? Again, you don't want to knowingly do harm to the environment. You don't want to be dumping waste where it can hurt animals or people or the ecosystem. We want to properly dispose of certain chemicals and materials so that we are not putting anybody at risk. These are things that you want to start thinking of as you read through your case studies in your assignment to help you complete the task asked of you. Before we jump into looking at what some of those case studies are, I want to finish off with technology in the workplace. Every organization has a policy for using the internet and other forms of digital communication. Are you familiar with your workplace's policy? Do you know the school's policy for the use of their devices? A lot of our students are given Chromebooks. When you are given a Chromebook, you have to sign a waiver. You have to sign an agreement. Do you know what you signed? Do you know our policy? Do you know if your workplace has a social media policy? Sometimes in addition to a technology agreement, there's also a social media policy. If you don't know it, you should look into it. You should check. There are some specific issues around privacy, confidentiality, and ethics to be aware of when it comes to technology. At work, you want to visit only websites that are directly related to company business. Do not use the internet to browse websites that you can visit at home, or that you should visit at home, or that you often do visit at home. Do not send or receive personal emails at work. Do not share or post photos or videos of your workplace. Now, I'm going to put in a little disclaimer here that for your final culminating activity, you are asked to upload photos to your digital portfolio. I cannot stress enough that you should only do this with permission. If there are people in your picture who do not want to be in your picture, then wait till they are gone before you take the photo. Always be mindful of information that might be posted around the walls, that might be on your desk. We want to keep sensitive information confidential and not accidentally take a picture of it to be sharing on your digital portfolio. It's not Twitter anymore, but do you still tweet? Man, I'm so out of it. I don't know, but do not tweet details about your workplace. Only use the company email to conduct company business. Don't use your company email to send personal messages to family or friends. Do not repeat information, whether it was meant for you or not. Sometimes you might get an email that wasn't meant for you. Don't go sharing that. A lot of organizations will actually have in their email signature that this is sensitive confidential information. If it is sent to you by accident, please disregard. Sometimes it'll say, please make us aware that you received this by accident, so that they can try to mitigate any fallout from it. You don't want to repeat information if it was meant for you, but especially if it's not meant for you. Lastly, be careful about how much information you reveal about the day-to-day activities of your workplace. Going home and complaining about it, you could be disclosing something that you shouldn't be sharing. We are almost out of time, so I had some more examples for us to work through. We will wrap up with speak up. If someone is doing something illegal, immoral, or unsafe, like stealing, lying, abusing, discriminating, you must speak up. It is the ethical thing to do. Now that we've gone into privacy, confidentiality, and ethics in a little bit more detail, go ahead to Unit 4 and complete the personal and business ethics assignment. It's posted on our Google Classroom. You can complete it on there, submit it right away. I can mark it and you can get that instant feedback. If you haven't checked our Google Classroom in a while, you can see all of our previous class recordings that get posted there, as well as some extra resources from some of our community partners. So thanks so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Tomorrow we are going to continue with the Unit 4 material and wrap up on Thursday talking about the scavenger hunt assignment at the end of your unit. Thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay warm, stay safe. All the best.